Wyoming Territory, August 1881, the wind tore through the canyon like it was trying to remember something, and the blood on her dress was dry before she stumbled into the clearing. Nara Whitlow's boots were split at the seams. Her shawl was torn from a mesquite branch 2 days back. She had not slept more than an hour at a time since she escaped. Her ribs ached from a man's boot, and her arms bore the bruises of ropes too tight for mercy. But she was free. Barely. Ahead, a black horse stood tethered to a juniper, saddle still on. A campfire burned low nearby, smoke curling into the pale morning. She collapsed against a rock, breath ragged, one hand still gripping the rusty knife she had taken from her captor's belt. A man stepped out from behind a boulder, rifle in hand, eyes narrowing. He was tall, maybe 30, with a dark beard and sun-bitten face beneath his hat. His shirt was soaked from creek water, sleeves rolled, a small hunting pouch slung around his shoulder. "Jesus," he said. "You hurt?" Nara tried to speak, but only a dry rasp came out. She forced herself to sit up straighter, though her bones screamed. "I am not going to hurt you," he said, setting the rifle down slowly. "My name's Iker Latham. I was tracking a wounded buck. You are bleeding." She looked down at the slice on her side. She had not even noticed it reopened. The blood was fresh again. "You got water?" she asked. He dropped to one knee, instantly pulling a canteen from his side. He held it out, but she eyed it warily. "I did not poison it, if that is what you are thinking." She took it anyway, because thirst beat fear today. She drank too fast, coughing, and he waited without a word. "I ran," she said finally, her voice raw. "Ran from who?" "3 men. They took me from a stage near Cheyenne, killed the driver, left 2 children behind, a boy and a girl." Her voice cracked. "They made me cook, clean. When I fought back, he did not ask. He sat back on his heels and let her speak or not. 2 nights ago they got drunk. I cut one's throat and ran. I do not know if the others are still tracking me." Iker stood slowly and glanced toward the east. "There are no fresh prints near the rise. No smoke beyond mine in a day. I think you got a head start." She blinked fast. "What about the children?" He looked down, jaw tightening. "You said they left them at the stage, a girl and a younger boy. I do not know if they made it." He nodded once and stepped back toward his horse. "I can check. You need a fire and stitches." "I do not want stitches. That wound says you do." He moved with calm purpose, unsaddling his horse and pulling out a bedroll, a pot, and a small tin box. She tried to rise, but her knees gave and she sank against the rock again. "You do not even know me," she said through clenched teeth. "I do not need to know everything to help. You need rest, and I need to find those children." He paused, then added, "You have a name." She hesitated. "Nara Whitlow." "All right, Nara, I will patch you up, then ride east. If I find them, I will bring them back." The fire crackled low as the sun dipped behind the ridge. Nara sat wrapped in Iker's spare blanket, her side bandaged, her hair clean from the creek. She had slept after he stitched her wound. He had been gentle but quick, and he had not looked at her like the men before. He had barely looked at her at all, except when necessary. He had returned just before sunset, leading 2 children on a rope line. The girl was 10, the boy maybe 6. Dirt streaked their faces, but they were safe. They were huddled near the stage wreck, Iker said as he handed them food. "Scared but alive, I buried the driver, took what supplies I could carry." The girl, Marley, clung to Nara's side after that. The boy, Milo, kept staring at Iker with wide eyes. "They are not mine," Nara said quietly once the children had fallen asleep near the fire. "I did not think they were, but I could not leave them. I know." She studied his face in the firelight. His eyes were steady, his hands calloused but clean. He moved like a man used to being alone but not hardened by it. "You are kind," she said. "I am alive," he replied. "Kindness is a choice. I make it when I can." She looked down at her hands. The bruises there were purple now, fading. Her chest ached from more than the cracked rib. "I have scars," she said suddenly. "Not just the ones you saw. I have them inside. I do not know if I still have a heart." He looked at her for a long moment. "I have known men who never came back from the war," he said. "Others came back wrong. I do not think it means there is no heart left, just means it got hurt." She swallowed hard. "I have scars where a heart should be," she whispered. He leaned forward, voice low and sure. "I will love every mark." Her breath caught. He was not just saying it, he meant it. The fire popped, and somewhere far off a coyote called. The children shifted in their sleep, and Nara felt something in her chest ease just a little. "I do not know how to let someone love me," she said. "Then let me show you," he said. "Slow, gentle, you do not owe me anything." "But I am staying," she nodded slowly, eyes damp. "All right." He reached across the fire and took her hand. She did not pull away. The next morning broke soft and gray. The sky stretched thin across the high Wyoming basin. Dew clung to the sagebrush, and a heron lifted off from the creek with slow, deliberate wings. Iker had risen before first light and cooked cornmeal in a dented pot, setting aside smaller portions for the children before waking them. Nara sat cross-legged near the fire, her side stiff beneath the bandage. Marley was brushing the tangles from her brother's hair with fingers more patient than her years. Milo blinked sleepily, his cheeks still puffy from the night's rest. "You always this quiet in the morning?" Nara asked, her voice low so as not to startle. Iker poured a bit of coffee into his tin mug, glanced up. "Only when the day's uncertain." She watched him stir the grounds with the back end of a spoon, careful and unhurried. Something about the way he moved reminded her of a man who'd once carved arrows for her brother during a hard winter, measured and sure, like he trusted his hands even if he didn't trust the world. "Where's home for you?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. "Then used to be a cattle spread down near the Platte. My brother ran it after our father passed, got sold off after a fire took the barn. I drifted after that, found work where I could, mining camps, fence lines. One winter with the mail relay near Rawlins. You've seen a lot of places. More than I ever thought I would." He sipped the coffee, "but none that asked me to stay." She nodded, tugging the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "I was born outside Laramie. My father ran a dry goods store till his lungs gave out. After that, I took in sewing. I never meant to leave, but after my older sister married off and my mother passed, I kept waking up feeling like I was standing in someone else's shoes." "You were alone." "I was lonely," she corrected. "There's a difference." He looked at her then, not with pity, but with a kind of quiet recognition. "I know that difference," he said. The children finished eating, and Marley wandered toward the creek to wash the tin bowls. Milo followed, but not before reaching out to touch the hem of Nara's skirt, just a brush of small fingers, like he needed to know she was still real. Once the children were out of earshot, Iker's voice dropped. "They can't stay out here long, you neither. Your wound's clean, but another day like yesterday and you'll tear it wide open again." She didn't argue. "There's a widow near Elk Hollow, a few hours north. She took in orphans during the pox last spring. She's got a barn and a strong back. I could ride out, ask if she's got space for 2 more. You'd leave us, just long enough to ask. I'd come back before dusk." She nodded slowly, but something uncertain flickered across her face. "I know I shouldn't ask, but why are you doing this?" He rose, brushing crumbs from his trousers. "Because someone should have done it for my ma." Nara didn't press further. Instead, she helped the children rinse their hands with water from the canteen, then sat with them as they stacked kindling for the midday fire. Iker saddled his horse with efficient hands, checked the cinch, and turned to her. "If I'm not back before the stars show, take the trail west. There's a rancher's post 3 ridges out. They'll give you shelter." "You'll be back," she said, not as a question, but as something she knew. He gave a single nod, then mounted and rode out, the sound of hooves fading into the hush of open land. The day passed slow and cautious. Nara kept the children busy gathering dry grass and smoothing a bedroll for the night. She taught Marley how to knot a snare from leftover twine and showed Milo how to fold his blanket tight so it wouldn't unravel in the wind. They were small things, but they gave shape to the hours. As the sun dipped behind the ridge and the chill crept back in, Nara sat beside the fire with her knees drawn up. The ache in her side had dulled, but something else stirred beneath it, an unfamiliar restlessness, like her body had begun to believe safety might last more than a breath. The crunch of hooves came just as the sky turned violet. Iker rode in with a sack tied behind his saddle. He dismounted, untied the bundle, and set it beside the fire. She said yes, he told Nara. There's room in her loft. She's got winter stores, goats for milk. She'll take them in. Marley reached for Nara's hand. "Do we have to go now?" "Not tonight," Iker said. "Tomorrow morning, it's warmer to sleep here." Milo leaned into Nara again, his thumb tucked into his fist. "Will you come with us?" She looked to Iker, then back at the fire. "I think I might stay." Iker didn't say anything, but his shoulders eased like he'd been holding a breath. Later, after the children were asleep, he sat across from her and pulled something from the saddlebag, a small tin box, rough-edged, its lid scratched. He handed it over. Inside were 3 buttons, a folded scrap of linen, and a small sewing needle, threaded. "I found it in the wreckage," he said. "Figured it might be yours." "It is," she said, fingers trembling as she touched the fabric. "It belonged to my mother. I kept it in my pocket. I thought it might matter." She closed the lid slowly. "I didn't think I'd see it again." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You've lost a lot, but not everything." They sat in silence, the kind that didn't need filling. The fire crackled low, and the stars blinked into being one by one. "Iker," she said after a long while, "I don't know what comes next." "Then we take tomorrow first," he said. "One day, then another. I'll be here for all of them." She didn't answer, just reached across the space between them and took his hand. No trembling this time, no hesitation. He held it like it was the most natural thing in the world. The next morning came cold and clear, the kind of chill that clung to your skin even after the sun rose. Nara laced her boots slowly, her fingers stiff from the night. Iker was already loading a small pack for the children, wrapping dried meat in linen squares and tying them with strips of hide. Marley helped Milo into his coat, eyes flicking often to Nara. When she stood, the girl came close, brow furrowed. "Will you come later?" she asked. Nara knelt, brushing a wind-tangled strand of hair from Marley's cheek. "I'll see you again." "I promise." Iker led the children up the narrow trail before the light had fully touched the ridge. Nara watched them disappear between the cottonwoods, her arms folded tight across her middle. She stayed by the fire until the embers cooled, then began to clean the camp in steady motions, packing the bedrolls, folding the blanket, shaking out the ashes. She didn't cry. There wasn't space for that yet. By the time Iker returned, the sky had gone pale gold and she was kneeling by the creek, rinsing out the tin cups. He dismounted and gave her a long look before speaking. "She's settled them in the loft," said. Marley asked for a pencil and paper. "Wanted to write you something." Nara didn't turn. "She's a good girl. She trusts you." "I didn't earn it. I just happened to be there. She chose you anyway." She stood, drying her hands on her skirt. "You always speak like that." "Like what?" "Like things matter more than they sound." He shrugged once. "You ever ride cattle drives?" "No. They teach you how to listen. Men don't talk much out there. You learn to notice what's left unsaid." She finally looked at him, eyes tired but steady. "What haven't I said?" "That you don't know what to do next unless someone tells you." The words struck deeper than she expected. "I've been told what to do most of my life," she said. "By men who didn't care if I lived through it. I'm not them." "No," she said. "You're not." He walked past her, crouching by the fire pit. "There's a ranch about 15 miles west. Belongs to a couple I knew during the last cattle run. They might need kitchen help or sewing. The wife's hands took frost damage last winter." "It's work, not pity." Nara came to stand beside him, arms crossed. "You think I should go? I think you should decide." She shifted her weight. "Would you come with me, if you ask?" She was quiet for several heartbeats. "What's waiting for you?" He looked up at her, the light catching the lines at the corners of his eyes. "Nothing I'd rather have than this." She sat beside him, their knees nearly touching. A hawk wheeled high above them, casting a sharp shadow across the grass. "When I was 16, she said, "I loved a boy who carved his name into the bark of an aspen and promised to marry me come spring. He drowned before winter ended, fell through the ice trying to cut a path for his father's cattle." Iker didn't speak, just listened. "I didn't cry for 2 days. When I finally did, it was during supper. My spoon clattered and my mother told me not to make a fuss. She said grief was a private thing. I think she meant well, but it stuck." She looked down at her hands. "I never let myself cry where anyone could see me again." He reached over, careful, and took her hand. "You don't need permission anymore." She didn't pull away. They rode west the next morning, slow and side by side. The trail rose through low hills scattered with pine and curled down into a shallow valley where the grass grew thick. Nara rode Iker's pack mule, its gait steady and calm. She didn't speak much, but she didn't need to. The silence between them had changed. It no longer felt like the cold hush of fear, but the kind of quiet that came when a soul began to rest. By late afternoon, they reached a sloped pasture where a split-rail fence bordered a modest house with smoke curling from its chimney. A woman waved from the porch, apron fluttering. Iker raised his hand in return. "You still sure?" he asked. Nara looked at the house, then at him. "I am." He helped her down, then carried her bundle to the porch. The woman greeted them with a brisk nod and showed Nara the kitchen, the root cellar, the back room where she could sleep. Nara listened, asked questions. She never once looked unsure. That night after supper, they stood outside beneath a sky thick with stars. The porch boards creaked beneath their feet and a dog barked somewhere off in the pasture. "Iker," she said, "I don't know where this ends." He turned to her. "Doesn't have to end, just change shape." She reached up, touched the edge of his collar. "I've got scars where a heart should be," she told the cowboy. He didn't hesitate. "I'll love every mark." Then she leaned in, and he met her halfway, not rushed, not desperate, but like two people who'd already chosen each other and simply stepped into the truth of it. When they parted, she rested her head against his chest, and he wrapped his arms around her like he'd always known she would fit there. The first snow came early. By the third week of September, the high wind had shifted from dry to biting, and thin drifts clung to the north side of the barn. Nara stood by the woodpile, splitting kindling with a hatchet too heavy for her wrist, but she swung it anyway. Each crack of wood calmed the tightness beneath her ribs. Inside the house, the kitchen smelled of rendered lard and sage, the ranch wife, Mrs. Holland, moved slow from a twisted knee, leaving most of the cooking now to Nara. They'd fallen into a rhythm, not friendship, not quite, but a quiet understanding built on shared silence and long days. Iker had stayed, just as he said he would, though he kept his bedroll out in the bunkhouse behind the barn. He helped mend the fence, tended the livestock when the frost grew thick on their backs, and kept his distance when he sensed Nara needed space. He never asked her for more than she freely gave. That morning she found him stringing wire along the west line, the sleeves of his shirt rolled back, his breath fogging in the cold. "You didn't come in last night," she said, brushing snow from the top rail. "Didn't want to wake anyone." He glanced over his shoulder. "Wind made the barn groan like a dying steer. Figured I'd keep it company." She leaned against the post. "I used to be afraid of that sound. Thought it meant something was coming." He twisted the wire taut, then drove a staple into the post. "Not everything that makes noise means trouble." Nara studied the horizon. The sky was pale and open, the kind of sky that made her feel small in a way she didn't mind. "Mrs. Holland said the hayloft needs sorting. I told her I'd do it after supper. She'll appreciate that. Her knee's worse than she lets on." "I know," she hesitated. "I've been thinking about the children." Iker didn't look up. "You want to see them? I want to know if they're still safe." "That's all." He straightened, brushing his hands on his trousers. "It's a half-day ride. I'll take you. I can ride myself." "I didn't say you couldn't. I said I'd take you." She met his gaze. "You always talk like that. Like you're offering something without asking for anything back." He gave a slow nod. "Only when I mean it." As they rode out the next morning, frost glinted on the tall grass like glass shards. Nara's scarf was pulled high over her mouth, and her gloves were stiff from the cold. Iker rode slightly behind, letting her set the pace. They reached the widow's homestead near midday. Smoke curled from the chimney, and the goats bleated behind a low stone wall. The children were gathering eggs when they arrived. Marley dropped her basket and ran full tilt, nearly knocking Nara off balance with the force of her hug. Milo followed slower, shy, until Nara knelt and opened her arms for him too. "You grew," she said, smoothing back his longer hair. "We get milk in the mornings now," Marley said, breathless. "And Miss Altha lets us keep a cat in the kitchen, but only if it doesn't steal biscuits." Nara laughed, a sound she hadn't heard from her own mouth in weeks. Inside, Altha brewed chicory and handed out slices of molasses bread. Iker stayed outside, helping the boy gather wood, giving Nara time she hadn't asked for but needed. When they rode back later, the sun was low and the wind had softened. Iker didn't speak until they reached the edge of the pasture. "You looked different when you held them." "How?" "Like your shoulders weren't braced for a blow." She adjusted her reins. "I think I've been waiting for something to go wrong. Every time it doesn't, I feel like I've stolen something." He nodded once. "You didn't steal peace, Nara. You earned it." She let that settle between them. That evening, after chores and supper, she stepped onto the porch with a wool shawl around her shoulders. The stars were sharp above, the air motionless. Iker stood by the hitching post, oiling a bridle. "You ever get tired of waiting for me to come around?" she asked. "I'm not waiting, I'm living beside you, that's different." She stepped down onto the hard, packed earth. "I don't know how to be soft, Iker, I only know how to survive. You don't have to be soft. You just have to stay." She touched his coat sleeve. "I want to build something, not just exist." He dropped the bridle, letting it rest in the dirt. "Then we start with tomorrow, and if tomorrow works, we build the next. One at a time." She nodded, not because she was uncertain, but because the weight of hope was still unfamiliar. "I want you in that future," she said. He stepped closer. "Then I'll be there." She reached for his hand. He took it, calloused fingers curling around hers without hesitation. This time she didn't look away. The frost had deepened into hard ground by the time the cattle were moved down into the lower pasture. Snow no longer dusted, it stayed. The ranch settled quieter in the thick of it, muffled steps and smoke-hung skies, breath visible in the morning. Nara had learned the rhythm of it. The creak of the pump handle at dawn, the thump of boots on the porch, the crackle of the stove when she lit it with stiff fingers before light. She no longer hesitated in the kitchen. Mrs. Holland had passed her the ledger book for winter stores without ceremony the week before, and Nara had taken it with a nod. She tracked flour use, salt blocks, the dwindling stack of beeswax candles. Her days were full, her nights steady. The ache in her ribs had faded into a memory, and the bruises once hidden beneath her sleeves had long since left. Iker spent more time near the house now. He still slept in the bunkhouse, but his boots waited by the back door most mornings, and he'd begun fixing the broken shutter by the kitchen without being asked. When she passed him tools, their fingers sometimes brushed, neither pulled away. One evening, the wind turned sharp and the clouds hung low with the smell of snow thick in them. While the others were finishing supper, Nara stood by the window and watched the sky. "You ever miss it?" she asked as Iker joined her, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Miss what?" "Not knowing where you'd be tomorrow." He leaned a shoulder against the frame. "Sometimes, then I remember how cold a bedroll gets when you've got no one beside you." She looked at him, her voice low. "I used to think I didn't need anyone." "That needing made you weak. You still think that?" "I think I was wrong." The table behind them held the remains of a meal, half a loaf of bread, a pan of beans gone lukewarm. Mrs. Holland had gone to bed early with her knee wrapped tight. The stillness of the house made her next words quieter. "Iker, I've never had a man ask me what I wanted. Not once. You never ask, but somehow you always give it." He didn't smile. He didn't move closer. He just said, "Then tell me now. Tell me what you want, and I swear to you I'll meet it." She swallowed. "I want you to come in from the bunkhouse." He turned his head slowly. "You sure? I'm not afraid anymore. Not of you. Not of what I feel when I look at you." He took her hand, his thumb running along her knuckles like he was memorizing each one. "Then I'll stay, Nara. I'll stay wherever you are." That night he brought in his things modest, folded neat, worn from weather. She cleared space in the corner chest without speaking. He didn't touch her until she reached for him first. When she did, it was without hesitation, without shame. They undressed slowly by the firelight, not hurried, not desperate, just careful, as if every scar and every freckle deserved to be seen. Their first night together was quiet. No declarations, no promises. Just the warmth of skin against skin, and the steadiness of breath shared beneath a wool blanket heavy with years. By midwinter, the snow had deepened to the porch rail. Iker built a sled from scrap wood and hauled it up the ridge trail to bring back firewood. Nara kept the house warm, the pantry stocked, and the ledger balanced. Mrs. Holland began to let her rest her bad leg while Nara took over the sewing. One morning, a letter came. It was folded rough, the address scrawled by a child's hand. Marley had written it, asking if Nara would visit again come spring. There was a pressed flower tucked inside, dry and pale. Nara kept it in the back of the ledger. Weeks passed and the wind began to shift. The snow melted slow, leaving dark soil and the scent of thaw. Nara planted onions in a small bed behind the house. Iker built a gate to keep the goats out. One evening, she brought him a tin box, same one he'd returned to her months before. "I want you to have this," she said. He opened it, saw the needle, the thread, the buttons. "It's yours." "It was my mother's. It was something I carried when I didn't know who I was, but I know now." He closed the lid, held it gently. "Then I'll keep it with me, always." Under a sky paling with spring, they stood together by the garden plot. His hand found hers and she leaned into him, no longer braced against memory. They married under the cottonwood tree behind the barn, with Mrs. Holland seated on a crate and the ranch hands gathered in their best shirts. Marley and Milo were there too. Altha brought them by wagon, dressed in new linen and wide grins. Marley braided flowers into Nara's hair, and Milo held the ring until Iker knelt and slipped it on her finger. Their vows were simple. No preacher. No book. Just Iker's voice steady and low, "I'll stand beside you through every season." And Nara's, clear as spring melt, "And I'll walk with you wherever the path bends." They built a life in the valley, quiet and slow. Iker planted fruit trees along the south fence. Nara began teaching Marley to read when the children came to visit, and by the second year they'd added a small room to the house with a cradle carved by Iker's hands. Their daughter was born in late summer, with dark hair and Nara's eyes. They named her Leora for the light that had returned after so much dark. Every night, Iker carried her from the cradle to his chest and walked the floor while Nara rested. Every morning, Nara watched the light rise over the ridge and felt no fear. Their love remained steady, not loud, not grand, but strong as the earth beneath them. And in the quiet hours when the wind sighed through the cottonwoods and the fire burned low, Nara would reach for Iker's hand. He always met it, always held on.